Okay, I heard you guys, so here we go. Now let's fix this dumpster fire of a guide. This will be an in-depth and comprehensive guide to fighting mechanics in the game, and this is meant to be beginner friendly while also providing information that more experienced players probably didn't know or never paid attention to. Starting off, there are 5 types of units in the game: fast units, heavy units, light units, artillery units, and ranged units. Fast units will typically have the highest movement stat with a medium attack and variable defense. Heavy units will usually have a low movement stat with high attack and high defense. Light units will usually have high movement stats with medium attack and medium defense. Artillery units will usually have the highest range with the lowest movement stat and low defense and attack. Ranged units will usually have a medium to high range with a medium movement stat and low defense. The attack will vary widely depending on the unit. Bear in mind, when units begin to have unique abilities like stealth or blast, the stats of these units will begin to veer from the typical trend a bit more widely in order to balance them with the other units of their age. There are 4 main stats to consider when appraising your units: attack, defense, range, and movement. Attack is a stat that determines the amount of damage your unit will deal. This can be augmented by terrain, effects from abilities, great buildings and some special buildings, unit counter bonus, and even the health of the unit. Defense determines how much damage your unit can shrug off and is affected by all of the same things as attack except the health of the unit. Range is how far away your unit can attack from. Movement determines how far your unit can move on the map as well as the order in which it takes its turn. A unit with a higher movement stat will take its turn before a unit of a lower movement stat. This is affected by terrain, being slowed by rocks, bushes, trees, rubble, swamps, and other obstacles. However, flying units are not affected by terrain when determining their movement range. As mentioned before, there are several unique abilities that units in later ages can have. I will only briefly mention a few more common ones since there are too many to mention in this video. I'll do more videos in the future highlighting each age's units along with their respective abilities. There are 2 types of unit reserves: attached or renewable, and unattached or non-renewable. Other than hovering over and reading the type it is, you can easily and quickly tell what it is by going to your game settings and toggling on highlighting of unattached units, which will mark all of your unattached units with an orange stripe. Attached units are trained manually in a barracks, and if you delete the barrack, it deletes all units that were trained in that barrack. Unattached units are gained through quests, Alcatraz, or Guild Expedition. They aren't attached to anything and can only be deleted manually. However, if you lose them, the only way to replace them is by collecting them again in the same way you gained them in the first place, or by building the respective barracks to train more attached units. If you wish to increase your unit's capabilities to fight, here is a list of buildings that you should build. The Statue of Zeus, the Cathedral of Aachen, and the Castel del Monte are great buildings that affect both the attack and defense evenly of all the units you are using offensively, meaning that they do not affect units you have set to defend your city. The Deal Castle and St. Bathel's Cathedral are great buildings affecting the defending units' attack and defense evenly. Watchfires, Ritual Flames, and other similar special buildings will increase your defending unit's stats. Starting in the contemporary era, some barracks will also increase either the attack or defense of your units. There are other special and event buildings that are too numerous to list in this video that also each buff your units in different ways that if enough of you guys want, I will make a separate video for. The Terracotta Army Great Building increases the attack and defense of both attacking and defending armies. You can also buff your units via your tavern, though it is recommended only to do this if you have to do it, as it is expensive to upkeep at a constant rate. Other buildings worth mentioning are the Alcatraz Great Building that gives you free unattached units each day. The units it gives is based proportionally on the amount and type of barracks you have built in your city. The barracks in fact do not need to be attached to roads in order for the Alcatraz to give you units for them. The Kraken Great Building will have a chance of killing a random unit when going into combat a certain number of times per day after collecting from it. This is entirely RNG based but can save you lots of manpower on more difficult encounters such as level 4 Guild Expedition. The Arctic Orangery Great Building gives your units a chance of dealing 1.5 times damage to units of the same age as the attacking unit. So a unit of Bronze Age going against a unit of Iron Age will not get this bonus. However, the chance does apply if a Bronze Age attacks another Bronze Age unit. This building is extremely useful since most units you'll be fighting throughout your playthrough will be limited to roughly the same age as yours and greatly increases average damage output as well as the potential for one-shotting units. The Virgo Project Great Building, similarly to the Kraken, has a chance after collecting to wipe out half of your opponent's army, though this does not apply when attacking your neighbors. As mentioned before, attack determines the amount of damage your units will do. Roughly speaking, if your finalized attack is equal to the defense of the defending unit, you'll deal about 5 damage. If the attack is about twice as much, you'll deal about 7 damage. Half as much and you'll deal about 2 damage. There's a rough calculation created by a player whose forum account has since been deleted, and I'll link the forum post in the description below. In the end, that's a lot of math and only really matters if you want to know if you'll come out on top in a fight or not. There's also a random factor, so your unit's damage is not guaranteed unless your attack is overwhelmingly higher than the defense of the opponent, in which the max range of damage is guaranteed. A few years ago, it was also patched that a unit is now guaranteed to deal at least 1 damage no matter how low its attack is. This was so that units of ridiculously high defense would not get stuck in an endless loot battle that bugged the game out. So for instance, a spearman will always deal at least 1 damage to a hover tank. Realistically, it's odd, but it makes sense when taken into context of the game's mechanics. The overall damage is also decreased the lower your unit's health is. When choosing units to go into battle with, it is important to consider what type of unit it counters. This can be the difference between getting annihilated and even winning a fight against units of a further age than yours. It is also important to consider what type of fight you'll be fighting, as continent fights have a much better AI than Guild Expedition or Guild vs Guild or GVG, and so it is not recommended to auto-fight continent fights. Rogues are a unit that have an ability to transform randomly into any other unit on the field except for another pre-transformed rogue. This means it's basically a free one-shot. However, Kraken and Virgo Project abilities will kill rogues without transforming them. If no other unit is present on the field for a rogue to transform into, it will simply die. Rogues are excellent at filling an army with in order to auto-fight, as this increases your chance of reducing the amount of damage you take. They are essential when bulk fighting in GVG or Battlegrounds, since it allows you to complete more fights without having to wait for your units to heal. Champions are decent for auto fights as well, since they are heavy units, typically with the same or better stats than the respective heavy units of its age, with the added bonus abilities of Chivalry and Call of Duty. Chivalry is not useful when combined with Rogue, since it only buffs your army's attack and defense if it's the only unit with Chivalry. However, Call of Duty will increase the attack and defense of your army after the first unit with Call of Duty dies. This is basically a free extra attack and defense buff to the rest of your rogues after they transform into other champions. When in combat, take a look at your opponent's range and determine where to place your units in order to avoid being the first one being hit. Most of the time, unless you're using artillery, your units will not be able to attack on the first turn. This means if you move forward immediately, the defending army essentially gets a free hit on you. Therefore, line your units up along the outline of the limit of your opponent's range. The range can be seen by the lighter red area when hovering over your opponent's units. If you are immobile, you can hold down your finger on the unit to see its range and movement range. After the first round of movement, find a tile of terrain that is in range of their units and gives a bonus of your unit's attack. Focus your fire on one unit at a time, starting with the units that counter your units the most. The faster you can destroy their units, the less overall damage output they have, and the fewer losses you'll obtain. If you are using rogues, try to move them ahead of your other units to act as a shield for your main units. Same thing with a champion. If your unit utilizes stealth, move them into the terrain that allows them to remain cloaked. This will force the enemy into melee range and takes away the advantage of ranged and artillery units. If, when attacking in guild versus guild, the defending army consists of mostly rogues, ignore the rogues and kill the main units first, and the rogues then become one-shot kills with nothing to transform into. Once the battle is over, don't bother healing units. It's a waste of precious diamonds and they will heal themselves over time anyway. Anyway, I hope this helps. I personally think this is a massive improvement over my previous fighting guide, and I will definitely be updating all of my other videos too. Keep an eye out for all of my other age-specific videos as well. They do take a bit of time to make since I actually do have to have an account for each age for me to record on, so bear with me on it. Please leave a like on this video if it helped you, and be sure to subscribe for more content. I'm trying to get better at sticking to a frequent upload schedule, and supporting my channel greatly helps motivate me to keep making content for you all. Anyway, have a good one.